was a pleasant Christmas day. I was in my kitchen getting myself some breakfast because it was about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I usually went to work at noon. I was kind of what you would consider the late to work type, but my boss accepted it. As I was getting myself some breakfast, I heard what sounded like knocking at the front door. I sighed. Who could it possibly be this time? I marched to the front door because I seem to have a lot of people knocking at my door nowadays, which was really pathetic because, well, like I've said, it's not like you would usually just have a person knocking on your door every single day. If you're a guy like me who lives in the suburbs of Kentucky, yeah, you get your neighbors knocking every day. But here's the thing. When I went to the door and opened it, there was no one there. Fucking ding-dong ditchers. Why do people in this county of Kentucky do that? I said to myself. I closed the door and the knocking resumed. I got fed up. I didn't like it when people ding-dong ditched me. It was infuriating. People did it every Halloween with me. So I marched to the door again, opened it once again, and still no one. I then came up with an idea. As soon as I would close the door, I would then go up to my window. There's a window that stares right down at my front door. Well, from a side view, so I'd be able to see who it was that was knocking at my door at 9:15 in the fucking morning. So, I closed the door, and yet again the knocking resumed. But this time, with a bit of a bang. The knocks were so loud this time, I couldn't even tell. But I still hashed with my plan and went up to the window in the living room. Well, the window that aims down to the front door. I saw what looked like a black hooded figure standing at the door. It wasn't until it seemed as if the figure noticed I was in the window, or, and this kind of scares me, he knew I was there. He turned up, and I saw pure horror. This figure was no average figure. He was all black. Not trying to be racist and all. He had red eyes that almost seemed as if they were stabbing inside me. I literally felt myself falling backwards and almost fainting from looking at this figure. It wasn't until I looked again and the figure was gone. Up and at him like that. I still wonder who that figure was. But when I read around on the internet, people kept saying that this figure was some sort of demonic figure named Deathaknight. I never had a pleasant morning after that, and I was always wary when someone knocks on my door. This story still terrifies me. Every single Christmas day I always think of this, and I've kind of thought a little bit less about Santa Claus. At least, nowadays I have. A few years ago, I was about 9 or 10, and at that time I still believed in the whole Santa Claus stuff. My mom and dad always told me that Santa Claus was real in my mind, but I had a feeling that maybe they... Never mind. Anyway, it was a cold Christmas Eve, back in... I forget the year, but... Of course it was December, obviously, because that's when Christmas is. I was laying in my bed. Oh, my comfy old bed. I miss it. I'm now 20 years old and I've moved away from my old house. Still remember my bed, but I will never forget this night. Anyway, I heard thumps coming up from above me throughout the night. That's where the living room is. The living room in my old house was right above my bedroom. So I was able to hear every thump from the living room in my room. I then thought to myself, "Yay, it's Santa Claus. He must have finally arrived to drop off gifts." So, with that, I quietly opened my door, quietly and slowly tiptoed upstairs. And I could see a perfect view of the Christmas tree from the staircase, but I wanted to get a closer look. So I hid myself behind two parts of the couches. And all that I saw, besides the tree all lit up with beautiful Christmas decorations that we had put on 2 weeks earlier, was some black figure. You want to know the first thing that I noticed that it wasn't Santa Claus? This figure had no red and white uniform. It had no red and white coat, no hat, and it did not look like a jolly old fat man. That much I know. This was a dark, skinny, almost... I can't even explain it. That wasn't until the figure seemed like it heard my breathing and turned to face me. The only thing that I could see in the darkness, because for some reason when the figure turned away from the tree, the lights went out. Not like they burst out, they just turned off. The only thing I could see in the dark were two red dots, which I had a feeling were the figure's eyes. I stared at those eyes. I almost fainted. I then passed out, and in the morning, my parents woke me up, wondering why the hell I wasn't in bed, and why I was up here, and why I had passed out. I didn't tell them anything. I didn't say a damn thing. I knew what I saw. A few years later, when I was about 15 or 16, I started browsing the internet to figure out what kind of thing has red eyes and looks at people so demonically. You want to know the result that I found? A demonic being made by a person named Mennonite in 9912 called deathaknight. I swear to God, that's what I saw that night. Ever since then, I thought a little bit less about the whole Santa Claus stuff. And I will never forget those eyes. One day, during a nice Christmas day, me and my family went over to my grandpa's house for a nice Christmas feast. Every year, my grandpa always celebrated Christmas with a big old Christmas feast that he did every year. Well, it seems as if his ancestors even did it back then as well. Anyway, while we were all gathered around the table, before we began eating, we said our prayers to our Lord Jesus Christ. After the prayers were over, we began eating. There was ham, mashed potatoes, stuffing, even a bit of some leftover turkey from Thanksgiving that we also had when we were up at my grandpa's. Basically, a whole lot of shit. And I mean that in a good way. My grandpa and my grandma were excellent cooks. They cooked wonderful feasts every occasion. They basically had big feasts every single occasion. Their family was very big on holidays. Easter, all those very special holidays. Anyway, while we were all sitting around the table enjoying the food that my grandpa and grandma had made for us, I thought I heard what sounded like knocking, or even sound like scratching on the walls. The scratching sounded so light, and yet I was able to hear it. I turned around towards the wall, and yet no one was there. And then turned to my cousin, one of my cousins. I'll name him John. I asked him if he had heard the scratching on the walls, and he said no and stopped being such a fucking pussy about all that paranormal stuff. He knew that I was interested in all that paranormal stuff and just told me to get over it. I did and continued eating. It wasn't until a loud crash in the basement sent everyone on their feet. Me, my cousin John, my cousin Andy, and my cousin Melissa, we went down into the basement. A box of old pictures had been tipped over and were shattered. I felt bad for my grandpa and grandma. They were very old pictures, some of even their parents. It wasn't until I looked down the hallway and saw what looked like a shadowy figure with red eyes disappearing into the floor. I screamed loud enough for everyone upstairs to be able to hear. I ran back upstairs and into my mother's arms. I told her what I saw, but no one except for my grandpa and grandma believed me. They asked me what I saw. I said I saw what looked like a shadowy figure with red, devilish eyes that looked like they stared through me, almost like they were burning my soul alive. My grandpa and grandma then made an announcement. It went like this. Friends and family, I'm afraid our little boy here has seen the presence of deathaknight, the demon knight of death. We all probably know about this by now, do we? Everybody nodded. Even my mother and father. I'm sorry, my boy, but I'm afraid this feast needs to end. Now we are all in danger. I never understood what my grandpa meant from that day forward, and I don't think I ever will. For some reason, what my grandpa said still gives me shivers to this day. Something that confuses me about this entire thing is how the fuck did my family, my entire family, my cousins, my own parents, my brothers and sisters, even my own grandpa and grandma, who made a feast every single holiday, how was it that they knew about it? Everyone in my family still believes in it. I will never forget that feast. The Thanksgiving feasts are not my favorite. Ever since then, that day cursed me. And I will never forget that shadowy figure disappearing into the floor.